Pharaoh's Rag, a piece of John's that really opened the door to us becoming, to our relationship. And that's the story. That's the part of the story we're in now. This is kind of a continuation where I left it just at the end of part one. Was we had John booked and we were about to have a workshop for. We did two of them back-to-back nights. Oh, now I remember. Right there on the tape. It was September 24th, 1998, I think. 24th and 25th. Can't remember what days of the week those were off the top of my head, but this calendar won't help. Anyway, as I mentioned in the last segment, I was really nervous at first about getting to meet him and stuff, but then once I met him and we chatted a little bit and set up time to get the workshops rolling and see what he wanted to talk about, everything was really cool. And so I do have to backtrack a little bit here because this piece is very important to the story, and it had to do with in just a couple of years before, probably just about a year before, probably in 1997, 98, in that time. I was very lazy as a guitar player. I really hadn't done anything much to challenge myself. I had just been, enjoying life the way it was, enjoying giving lessons, enjoying hanging out with my kids and stuff, and not really pursuing any musical goals, but always thinking that anything I wanted to play on the guitar, I would be able to. I didn't think there was anything out there that anybody could play that I couldn't play. But I never really tested that or felt I had to prove it. And for some reason, oh, it was Aaron. Brilliant. Oh, so lucky that popped back into my head because I had... one day I had a young student who I even just saw recently, Aaron, and now he's not so young, but he, Aaron, if you're watching this, all's well, buddy. But at one of his lessons, he asked me, he said, we were talking about practicing, and I said, well, you should try to practice maybe 40 to 45 minutes a day, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter. You can't always get that much time in because if you really wanted to, he was already pretty accomplished and wanted to push it a little bit. And then he said, man, caught me way off guard. He said, well, how much do you practice? I have not been practicing much. I have just been cruising. Have not been playing much, have not been, I felt busted. And I think that's what inspired me. Said, I've been really lazy as a guitar player. I'm going to take one of the most I'm going to look for some of the most challenging pieces I've ever considered playing, and see how long it takes me to get it under control. I didn't want to use the word mastered yet because that's a whole different story. As you can tell right there, it's still not even quite mastered, but well, I'll save that argument for another day. But and so there were two pieces in the running. I thought, the two hardest pieces I could think of that I might want to tackle were and this was well before my conversation with Mark Hansen as well, so there was no Renbourn on the horizon, so to speak. Anyway, and I thought, I'm going to work on Pharaoh's Rag, and I knuckled down and started putting in an hour or two a day for a little while, and in a certain amount of time, I don't remember how much, felt like this is coming together. This is really cool. And I continued to play it, and I got it to where I thought it was in pretty good shape, but there were still parts that were very difficult. How's that go? That little lick was killing me. I kind of have it now. There are other parts that I fumble up on. How's that? Well, anyway. Okay, you saw it all unfold in its own mess. Anyway, where I'm going with this is that I now kind of had a new piece that I thought, you know, this is great. I haven't learned a new song since, man, Alice's Restaurant probably, or something. Probably not true, but still. Anyway, now cutting back to the workshop story. So the night of the first workshop, John gets up there and talks about the history of fingerpicking, goes into, or especially the English history of fingerpicking, and goes into stories about Davy Graham and Bert Jansch and Paul Simon and Al Stewart and some of the guys that were there in the early days. And this just goes great. The 10 or 12 people that are there have the time of their life hanging out with everybody's uncle is what John felt like, and everybody just felt completely at ease with them. Sometimes he'd even have them play things, and I don't think even anybody got too nervous, you know. He'd give them some advice on what was going on. And so the evening was great. We had a just fabulous time. And at the end, 4 or 5 of them hung around to just have a little bit more personal interaction with John, and started asking him some questions about about some of the songs, and in particular about The Hermit, which is around here somewhere. I just had it. Oh well. Anyway, and the album, and said, "Hey, do you ever play anything from that?" And he said, "Oh, those songs are way too hard." He says they're too high maintenance. They're, you know, and which I was kind of glad to hear after knowing my opinion of the album The Hermit. I was thinking, man, these pieces are some serious guitar playing. And so he, Kevin's next question was, he says, "Oh, that's too bad, because I was hoping I'd hear you could play Pharaoh's Rag for us." And John just kind of shakes his head and says, you know, laughs it off, and like, no way is that one in any kind of performable shape. And my dear friend and student Kevin says, "Oh, well, Neil can play it." John looks at me like, he says, "You can? Let me hear." And I said, "Okay, it's a really good thing. This had not crossed my mind." I said, "Okay, I better just sit down and grab a guitar." And it wasn't even my guitar, which wasn't there at the time. So it was probably Kevin's guitar. I forget. I think it was a Santa Cruz FS maybe. But, oh, this is in the video, but I don't think you can see me very well because we're just somebody standing in front of the camera. But we luckily at least got a little of this on tape. So anyway, I sit down and I grab the guitar and I tune it up and I just start going into it. And luckily I didn't have time to like start shaking or sweating. I was sweating by the end, but I wasn't shaking too much, I don't think. And because just the magnanimity of it is starting to run through my head. I'm trying to play this technically really challenging song, and the composer is sitting right there, you know, with his nose about this far away from my hands, just glued. And I'm like sometimes forgetting to breathe as I'm playing this. And I get through it. I botch up a few little spots, but manage to plunder on, I guess. And I hit the last chord. And I might even add the low C in there that he doesn't do on the record, but who, you know. Anyway, and he kind of sits back and this genius of a guitar player that could be the biggest snob in the world comes up with something so humble and flattering to me. I mean, what I remember, it was something along the lines of, he really felt honored. He thanked me, that's what it was. He kind of thanked me and felt honored that I would invest that much time in my life to learn his piece. And I was just floored that was his take on it. Because I remember, I didn't think about this till much later, but it's sort of like a lot of people, if you play something of theirs for them, might not take it as kindly and humbly and flatteringly and stuff. Imagine if I played this. For its composer, the reaction would have been quite different. Sure would have found a lot of flaws in it. I'm just guessing. But in any case, John said he you know, again, thanked me for playing it, and you know, and felt he was touched that I'd gone to the amount of time and trouble it took to learn Pharaoh's Rag, and I said, hey, I know a lot of your pieces. He says, matter of fact, I said, hey, you know, like your some of the duets. Do you ever play any of your duet songs, like the ones that you did with Stefan? And he says, oh no, because I just don't have. There's nobody around that I can play with usually. And he said, and they're really hard. And I said, oh well, I play some of them. And he goes, really? Like what? And so I went into Snap a Little Owl. And he reaches over, grabs a guitar, and starts playing along. Now I'm getting really nervous, but I was having a blast. So we just improvised our way through Snap a Little Owl, and then and we finished. And he said, "Hey, do you know any others? Or do you know any of the rest of those?" And I went into there was another one I knew. I can't remember it now. Why a Duck? But that's how it starts. It's D minor. Oh, okay. I'm not gonna try to resurrect that in front of you here. But and then we just kind of did a little jam. We started talking about blues, and it went into a whole story about how he learned this blues tune from Alexis Corner and thought it was just one of the coolest things he'd ever heard, and he and Bert played it or jammed on it a little bit and stuff, and then a couple of years later he heard an album called Kinda Blue by this trumpet player that he'd never heard of or was not too familiar with, and thought, wow, who's this Miles Davis guy, and what's he doing playing an Alexis Corner song? So that was how we got introduced to stuff from Kinda Blue. And anyway, that was the end of that night, more or less. We sat and played a little bit, and there were 4 or 5 people still hanging around. At the next night's workshop, he kind of changed the format. He did, because it was a different group of people, a different group of 10 or 12, and he started talking about, kind of gave the same introduction, but then talked a little bit more about playing duets and stuff, and asked me to come up and demonstrate some songs with him, and invited some other members. We did all blues there with, that's what it's called, I think that, and my friend Rich Olson, who guested on my tune. Rico's Best Shot on the album, on the, I'll get to that album a little bit later, but if I forget that story about Rico, forgive me. Anyway, Rich was at that second night and played some really cool leads while John was playing the little bluesy lick. That was a blast, and I know Rich had a time of his life as well. So so again, the second night he talked a little bit more about duets, and we played Snap a Little Owl, and we might have played Looper's Corner. I might have worked on that during the day too, which I didn't know it at the time. Anyway, go something like that. I'd have to brush that one up. And after that evening, it was kind of the same thing. A bunch of people hung around, and there were 4 or 5 of us, and John probably about midnight decided it was time to check out, and he packs up, we say goodbye, and he, you know, heads out the door, and a thought runs through my mind, and I'm thinking, oh man, I don't know when I'll ever see him again. This is like, I gotta make a plan. And so, without really a plan, I open the door, I run down the street a little ways, and I say, hey John, hang on a second. That was so much fun playing with you. If I could set up a concert somehow that I could like open for you and we could do a few of those duets, would you be interested in doing that? I don't know what I was thinking. It must have been the wine talking. And he said, oh Neil, that would be great. He said, call Mitch in the morning, his manager, and I'll call him and make sure that he knows it's okay, and we'll, you know, whenever I'm going to be here next, we'll make a plan for it to happen. And he drove off, and I thought, oh my God, now what am I going to do? Well, I went home and probably didn't sleep that night, because things were racing through my head that it's like I've just been invited to share the stage with John Renbourn. And anyway, so the next morning I think, well, where could we do something like this? And I called up our local, really nice little venue here that holds about 300 people, Montalvo. They have this, a couple of different areas there. They have an outdoor stage that they can get about 1,000, 1,100 in. They do big things on the front lawn. Anyway, it's an old mansion built by Senator James Phelan back in the early 1900s. And anyway, so I call up Bruce Labadie, who books stuff at Montalvo, and ask him if he'd be interested in doing a John Renbourn concert there. And he goes, well, maybe, tell me more. And and he knows, of course, who John Renbourn is. I'm thinking, getting Renbourn a gig at Montalvo should be a no-brainer. And I said, well, really, we're looking for something that I would play with him. And he goes, you would play too? And I said, yeah. And he says, okay, I think we could do it. And I didn't have any idea. He might have known a little bit about, I've been in this area for a really long time. But I think he just figured that I had enough of a local following that I could add a little bit of, in case enough people hadn't heard of John. I'm thinking I can get 300 people in there on my own just by word of mouth, telling them that they have to go see the greatest guitar player in the world. And so we set this up for May of 1999, May 6th, and which is a Thursday night. And I get back to Mitch and John, and because he said that would be when they'd be in town, and so we so this is like 6 months later after the thing. So during those 6 months, I started thinking that, wow, this, again, having been really lazy for maybe the last 15 years, it was about 1985 the last time I seriously wrote some songs, some instrumentals and things, and I thought, I need some new kind of stuff to do like maybe even some new song, or maybe I should try to write a song or two that we could play as a duet. That was actually my logic. And although I was thinking we could also do a duet maybe of something like Windy and Warm. Great tune, John can play along. Let me think. Anyway, we could have come up with he could have come up with something brilliant on the spot. And then I was thinking, I always start that song with just a quick little hammer on from E to G. And I thought, I need something a little catchier, just as a better introduction, more than maybe just one beat. And I stumbled into this. Oh, I kind of like that. But then I slid up here and I'm not really in a good position to play the melody. What I really remember thinking is, I just need to write a whole new song around that. That lick was too cool to just use as an intro for Windy and Warm. So I started messing around with other things I could do with it. Anyway, and that turned into like a really cool piece. I decided to call it Back to the Drawing Board because, well, and I remember thinking, oh, this would be a really easy one to come up with a nice little harmony melody to, as well. I thought, oh, that is so cool. Now I've got a new piece that I could maybe turn into a duet and play some stuff with John. And so what happened after that? It just set me off on trying to write some pieces again, and I ended up coming up with a couple of others over the next month or two, over the first part of 1999, and what was it? Oh. On the Horizon, a nice little pastoral thing. And then I thought, you know what, I need a kind of showstopper too. So I wrote another one that was kind of, oh, I don't think I can remember this. Anyway, so I had these 3 new pieces, Back to the Drawing Board, On the Horizon, and SOS, as that one became titled. And I thought, this is great. Now we can go into these concerts with John and play a few new tunes, and who knows where it's going to go after that. The Montalvo show sold out like in about a week of when they put tickets on sale in January. And so Mitch, John's manager, called me and said, well, do you guys want to book another show someplace else? And I said, well, we could see. And I started calling around and seeing if we could, because we kept getting more and more requests for tickets. And people were just saying, oh man, I'm sorry I didn't get in there soon enough. And so I got a hold of a friend or a guy that books at the local coffee shop called the Espresso Garden. And they had all kinds of traveling musicians come through there from time to time. I played there once before, I think, as part of with Michael Chapdelaine and a few other. There was a bunch of people that were playing at an event going on here in San Jose, and then we all did short sets there once before. So I was a little familiar with the place. Anyway, and so we booked the coffee shop, and they usually like to get about 50 or 60 people in there, and they sold like 90 tickets, like pretty quickly too. So they ended up having to move all the tables out and pack the place. So really, the first night I got to play with John was not at Montalvo. It was Wednesday night, May 5th. At the Espresso Garden, and that show didn't quite go as I had dreamed, and that I think is where we'll pick up this story now tomorrow. Okay, stay tuned for part 3.